We're here today to talk about thriving in practice, and there's no one I can think of better to advise us on how to do that than Jennifer Dubowsky. So Jennifer's coming in from Chicago, and Jennifer is the brains trust behind TCM007, having written a book, having been a massive international blogging success. And Jennifer now is in a transition period into a new practice. So we're here to learn from Jennifer about how she's got to where she is, what she's doing right now, and where she's going. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, hello, everybody who's out there, and I am happy to be here. I hope that I can be helpful. And if I make any little mistakes here, please let me know. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. So pretty much any questions you have, feel free to ask me. I'm very open, and I'm happy to talk. So me what you would like me to start with.
Well, so my first question, Jennifer, is, I know that you've been in practice now for, it's 15 years. That's right? It's right,
Correct,
right
yes.
on 15-year mark. So which is really interesting, because I would say that sort of for most people about a midpoint in their acupuncture career, early to midpoint. So, I'd love to hear from you about your reflections on the last 15 years. So we'll be looking at going back from when you started to where you are now, perhaps sharing with us your successes and things you would have done differently had you have known.
Okay. All right, well, it's interesting because in preparing for this, I thought more than I have in a while about what I did in the beginning and what I'm doing now. And in some ways I'm like, wow, I'm so happy I'm not right at the beginning again. But I made a list actually of things that I did do in the beginning that I thought were very helpful. And then also having to come to terms with sometimes you do things that are not so helpful, and that's how it goes, or you make mistakes. So I feel that the smartest thing I did was I started with as low an overhead as I could do while still having what I considered, a nice space to work in, to be professional, and all of those things. And that really helped me tremendously because it took away the weight. I rented rooms, and I had no utilities, so I didn't have a locked-in lease. Really, all my expenditures after the initial setup was going to be based on how much I was seeing patients. So if I saw less patients, I paid less rent. And that was, especially like the first year or two, really helpful for me. And I was also concerned coming out of school, you have student loans, that I did not want to just create more loans. So I would say in the beginning, that was the smartest thing I did. Some other things I did though, which I had even forgotten about, was I just remembered when I was making my list, do you guys have Whole Foods in Europe? You do? Okay, great. So there's a Whole Foods near my office, and they had just opened up. And one good thing about being in Chicago at that time was it was actually a felony to practice in this state until 2001. And I started my practice in 2002. So there were not a lot of acupuncturists here. So it helped and it didn't help because it wasn't very popular, but there were not a lot of people to compete with. So I probably had some opportunities that if I had been in Colorado, for example, people with greater expertise would have had. So I made a deal with Whole Foods, and this actually was definitely a helpful thing I did, was I would come in once a month on Sunday afternoons and do free consultations. And it helped in a couple ways. One, it got me meeting people in my demographic and close to my office. But the other thing, which was a huge plus, is they made a big poster and put it in the window with my name, my phone number, etc., to advertise I'd be there, but it was also advertising for my practice. So I did that for about a year and a half. I think it was a great move, but I also thought to myself when I made the list that I was really glad I didn't have to do that on Sundays anymore. So I suggest it's a great thing to do, and it's one of those things you kind of just have to do sometimes in the beginning. So those things were very helpful. I also did some talks. Some were helpful, some I don't know how much difference. I would say my biggest, I don't want to call it a failure, but when I started my business, the internet was not quite as popular as it is now. The phone book was still around. And this was actually my first lesson in the internet. So my first year, I paid over $800 15 years ago for an ad in the phone book. And I paid $80 for an online ad in an online acupuncture directory. I got several patients from the $80 ad for 1 year, by the way, $80 for 1 year in the online directory. And I got one phone call and no patients from the over $800 I spent in the phone book, which also taught me about the power of the internet. So, you know, that was 800. I would say this may sound a little stupid, but one thing I noticed is sometimes when you get caught up in ideas, or at least when I do sometimes, I get so perfectionistic that every once in a while I will miss something that's incredibly obvious. So another thing that I would do in the beginning, though now I do much less posts, is I created these postcards. And I had the postcards, I had my logo, all of this stuff. And I did put the address, but I realized I sent all of them out and I had forgot to put my contact information. And just, you know, and I mean, I had spent so much time on every stupid detail down to like the font and everything else, and I forgot my contact information. So whatever, that's how it happens. So that was just something I would say to people: make sure you get the basics in before you get too detailed. Eventually I got my website. Definitely, I mean, clearly in this day and age, you have to have a website. My blog has really ended up being one of my best-selling tools for so many reasons. And it was something I didn't even want to do in the beginning. But the reason I did it was the guy who was advising me on web stuff at the time said to me, and this is still true today, I believe, that Google and web searches like new articles. So if you have a static website that is never changing and never presenting new things, they're going to stop caring about you. So that the main reason I started the blog is that way I would have fresh content on a regular basis. And also what I realized over the years, this is something I realized more over the years too, is sometimes I wrote fantastic articles, I spent hours on them, but other times I would find a research article, an intro paragraph, I would link to that, that article on research or whatever I found interesting, but it was still generating new content, which then helped me rise in terms of the search engines and helped my visibility rise. And I found I really liked the blogging thing. So that was great for me too. So I really recommend to anybody, if you want to get your website out there, there's definitely try and take at least go to a few presentations or classes. I found these little meetings and presentations where I did learn enough about analytics, SEO, keywords, because you do need some of that for sure. But consistently over time providing valuable content absolutely helps your website get recognized as a higher authority, which means when people search for you, they are going to find, or search for acupuncture or whatever it is, they're more likely to find you. So that was a big win for me. I also, and this is something some people may not realize, I wrote articles and still write articles and am published on other sites. There's two advantages to that. One, you access a whole new audience. Two, anywhere that you do an article for, you want to make sure they have your bio and your website link there because of two reasons. One is that when you have a link to your website, the more people who link to your website, it again makes Google think you are more important. So getting links to your website is really good, and it exposes you to another audience. So those were things. I also did networking events. I did, a lot of things were hit and miss. Like I started going to different networking events. Sometimes I went once, it wasn't for me. And then there's a few that I still attend. So those were things I did in the beginning that I think were helpful and occasionally not so helpful.
And I'd like to interject at this point and just remind our audience that Jennifer was our guest webinar presenter on a webinar looking at social media, reaching out using social media, including blogging, as a way of attracting a new audience. So there's a 1 hour tutorial which Jennifer's done, that covers that in far more detail. So Jennifer, I'd love to hear about your face-to-face stuff. What did you do that was the traditional? You said going to networking meetings. What were the relationships that you were forming? Can you think of a couple of key people at that time who helped to?
I can think of key people over the years, because what I've tried to do is find people that I admired, that clearly that they had something that excited me, and I thought, wow, I want to know you. I want to know how you're doing what you're doing. But I made a real point of developing relationships I try not to ask. I feel that it's a mistake to start a relationship by asking for. It's much better to actually really develop a relationship, and then hopefully it can be mutually beneficial. So I think I might have mentioned to you, there's a woman I follow still to this day. She's a radio host, and I originally spotted her at a panel discussion I attended. She was on the panel, and I just thought, wow, she is so cool, and she's got it so together, and she had a great social media presence, and she had great tips. So I made a point of introducing myself, and then I started following her all over social media, and I spent about a year just sending little tweets. Like I was following even stuff like she posted some stuff about her mother, and I was like, oh, that's so sweet, or whatever. And after that, we kind of started connecting on a further level, and I really like her. I'm actually friendly with her now. But eventually that led to, one, me learning from her. It also led to me being on the radio at least twice due to her influence. It led to me meeting other people. And even to this day, we have a great connection. And, she still inspires me. She's a great person to follow. And she's also so strong as a woman. And that's so impressive to me. So that's a good one. I think I mentioned in the social media seminar that I also found Andy Crestadina, who is an absolute whiz with content marketing. And both of these people, by the way, are people I spotted when I attended. There's a group here in Chicago called the Social Media Club. They actually have international chapters. So it is worth looking around wherever you are. And they would put on events like once a month, and it would usually be a little networking, a presentation, and I found them valuable and helpful. So I started going to them pretty regularly. Plus I started making friends in the group, and to this day, a couple of my really good friends are from that group, but it's great too because they love social media, and they even just give me tips here and there because that's their job. That's what they're in all the time. But I spotted both Andy and Amy attending these events, and I made a point of getting to know them. One, because I admired them, but I knew they had a lot to learn. Then I learned Andy did events once a month where he had the same kind of concept, and I learned a lot from him. But again, I really tried never to approach it, and I try to approach this with things in life. I don't want to be somebody who takes. I'd much rather have a mutually beneficial interaction. And I don't think people like it when you introduce yourself as someone who, hi, my name is Jenny, and what can you do for me? They want to know what you can do for them before they care about what they can do for you. So I think that was a big thing. And I think another thing that was very big for me, and learning this in the beginning really helped, was coming from a place of abundance rather than a place of scarcity, which especially in the beginning is not easy. Because like my first year of practice, I didn't even buy a magazine. Like I was like on a very tight budget. And, but you know what? If a patient can't schedule, they can't schedule. And you just, okay, well, whatever works for you. I just feel that works better because when you come off as, you know, desperation is never attractive. And I really tried, even if maybe I felt a little scared inside, that I was going to come from a place of abundance and giving. And I think that has definitely worked for me, because now, years later, there are relationships I started 10 years ago, like so many years ago, that I now have gotten referrals from other states, other countries, people. I just got an email from someone who was referred to me by someone I've known on social media for many years, but never met in person, in another state. So I think that was one of the things, or the keys when I had social interaction, was to really be careful that I didn't come off, that I came off as someone who wanted to give, not just take.
And I'm gonna head over to our audience now. If anybody's in the webinar today that has questions for Jennifer, if you can, Helen perhaps, or Deborah, if anybody has questions, just either raise your hand or send me a message. Please
feel free.
This is it. And this is one of the lovely things about having Jennifer in the hot seat, so to speak, is being able to answer these questions. And at this first part of the webinar, we're looking at the early days, the setting up, the what would you do differently. And Jennifer, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure every person has a typo on a business card or an omitted telephone number from their flyer. That we've all done it. So
no, those postcards, to this day, I've never forgotten that one.
Yeah, and it will never happen again. This is the whole thing about.
That's right. It will never ever happen again. I mean, I couldn't believe I did that, and I didn't even realize it till I sent all of them.
Of course.
It was not until like after I sent them all and looked at it, I was like, ta-da!
And also that if anything is also one of the reasons to want to get into online media. Because you make a mistake on your website, that can be changed.
Right, you can change 5
seconds. It's the moment
exactly.
I always get more nervous with print, because you're right, it's a commitment. So do we have any questions from the audience before we move on?
Anyone out there, please feel free.
Jennifer's also, it's so lovely hearing your story, because of course you're so passionate about what you do. And I love that idea that you start a relationship with authenticity, and that you with everything you sort of come into it from a pragmatic business point of view, but also a very generous personal view as well. So let's go back to that list that you were talking about that you did around.
Okay.
Just some of the highlights of that setting up and the kicking off phase.
Okay. You want me to just go, because I didn't also, actually, of course, make a whole list.
And one of the nice things too is you mentioned your rental agreement, where you had negotiated your rental agreement with that you were in part paying rent pro rata on who you were seeing. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that, because in terms of business, I guess this is the infrastructure of business. It's the platform in how we work, is these sorts of arrangements. It'd be great to hear more from you about that.
Okay. Well, what I did, and again, this is before the internet was so popular, is before I graduated the master's program, and I knew I was going to come to Chicago, I basically just scoured Chicago for any place that looked like it might want to have someone like me and my practice in it. And I ended up sending out about 80 letters and resumes to locations that I thought might be interested. 10 replied to me. I ended up meeting with about 3. I had one other meeting where the guy stood me up. And then took a look at those options and decided that the option, which I'm actually currently in, but as we'll talk about later, I am leaving soon. And that just seemed really the most feasible for so many reasons. One, great location. It was a very nice space. And the deal really worked perfectly for me, because I would rent like 1 day set, but then everything else was based on how many people I saw. So I would pay her by the hours that I used the rooms. So even if I used 2 rooms, I would pay for each room. But again, if I have a really busy week, she gets more money. And if I have a slower week, I don't have to pay as much rent. And I did not have the responsibility of utilities, of cleaning, of maintaining the space. And that was incredibly helpful for me, because it made my overhead so much lower. And even in marketing, I have pretty much always found ways to do marketing that did not involve a lot of money. And to this day, I pay very little money for any kind of marketing. I've never been someone who did like ads or anything like that. a lot.
Can you extrapolate on that a bit more? Just that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people listening today
Well,
would be interested in very, low. You sound, from everything you're describing, as your high activity, low budget, so that
yes.
what you make up for, rather than paying, that instead you do with lots and lots of activity. So maybe tell us a little bit more about
Yes. Okay. Well, for example, content, okay, will live forever. I have articles. I've literally written probably 1,000 articles. Not all on my website, but many of them are. And the thing is, I will still get hits from articles I wrote years ago on other sites and mine, because if it is your content with your name and a link to your web address, it is yours forever. But if you pay for an ad, when you stop paying, it's gone. And it's also, yeah, you'll be at a higher ranking, but you're still in the ad ranking. You're not a rank because you're organically ranking. And again, you stop paying, it's gone. So that was where I found I did the best, was consistently putting out positive and useful content, and where I found my niche. And I think everyone has to find what works for them, because if you're not authentic, it's going to show. I really discovered that what I was particularly good at and enjoyed doing and tried to evolve more into, but I really think this helps attract patients, is making Chinese medicine understandable to the general public. There is still so much out there where people just do not have a clue. And when you explain it in a way that they can relate to, it makes them so much more open, and it makes them feel so much more comfortable. So I also found, and by doing several articles and looking at analytics, you can see, wow, this post did really, really well, and it's lived on for years. This post, no one ever really cared that much about, so I probably won't write more about that fact. So I would say that is something I did. Where I made some investments were, I still have a web guy who I pay $50 a month to help maintain my site or make tweaks if I need it. And I did get advice from people clearly on some of this stuff, because that is not my specialty. Also, and this goes back to the content marketing course, by attending those seminars and those networking events, I learned even just simple tricks of how to get your content recognized and rank higher. And some of that doesn't even have to do with how good the content is. It has to do with keywords. It has to do with title. It has to do with images, how long you make your paragraphs, just things of that nature. So that is how I did it. And as far as other types of marketing, yes, I had brochures made up. I did go around the neighborhood, especially in the beginning, because I'm in an office building and people are not going to know you're there if you don't get out. I did do some coupon things. I did the postcards, things of that nature. But I really just found more and more where I got the most benefit was through the internet. Now, I know other people, for example, who've been better at, I have a friend who, she got hooked up with a hospital right away after getting out of school. So now she's only at the hospital part-time, but she has a ton of great connections with MDs who, since her private practice isn't in the same place, they can refer to her. And I think that's a great way to do it too. But I didn't have that opportunity, so I had to find something else.
And so there's a question coming from Helen just about the actual, you mentioned being able to do analytics on the subjects, and she was just asking about how you actually choose the topics that you're going to write about. And I should make a commentary here that it's really interesting, Jen, because you're such a effervescent person. It's really interesting that you've actually chosen online, which I've always thought that perhaps introverts would be more suited to online, and extroverts like yourself should be out public speaking.
No.
So that's a double barrel question about how do you choose the subjects? And I'm so fascinated by.
So here's the first thing. The truth is, I am what I call an extroverted introvert. So in truth, another reason I like online is I can do it alone in my pajamas and not have to talk to people. Okay? Because while I certainly do well with people and I can get very excited, I can only do so much of that. And it takes more out of me. And I know it's hard to believe, people don't feel this way about me. but really deep in my soul, I'm somewhat introverted. So being able to find a medium, because even though I've done talks and I've done them very well, that takes a lot more out of me, because I feel it's so important for me to feel prepared and on it and ready and wanting to do a good job. Whereas if I have a post I'm working on, I can go back to it all week and keep editing it. I can do it at work. I can do it at home in my pajamas. I can just, whatever I want to do. And in some ways, I would say I even feel like coming up with the cartoon in a way that's also like me putting it out there, but having a little space. You know, it's TCM007, the superhero, not me.
It's sort of like
so,
an alter ego.
Right. Like I do feel like, because I use social media a lot, I'm extremely conscious of being a positive person and putting things out there in a good way. But of course, you can control it so much more. So I would say, yes, I could do even more talks, but in the end, there is a part of me that is an introvert. So that's why I think it has worked very well. So choosing topics, that was the other part of the question, correct? Okay, so I have found different ways of choosing topics. One way, which I think is a great idea, is if there is something or a patient group you want to target, think about what they're interested in and write about that. Because then if people, like, for example, I've written a few articles on vulvodynia. I have gotten emails from people in other countries, etc. And that's something that comes back. And that leads me to a second part of it. Yes, write about people you want to attract. Like, do you want to treat migraines? Write some articles about migraines. If you want to treat fertility, write articles about fertility. But here's another thing. What I also learned is if you pick an incredibly popular topic, you are less likely to get noticed. So that's why, for example, vulvodynia in some ways brings me more than if I do back pain. Even though I like to attract back pain, there are tons and tons of articles about acupuncture and back pain. And there's a lot more competition, whereas there's a lot less articles for vulvodynia. Or even if I'm gonna do a subject that other people might be doing, I try and do it in a different way. Because having it be a little more unique also makes a difference. Because unless you are the biggest, you are gonna get beat out if you take the most popular topic. So you have got to kind of have a bit of your niche. And then when people are seeing you for other things, you know, you can start building upon it. But that's pretty much how I choose is, one, what am I interested in? Who do I want to attract to my practice? And what topics are performing well for me? And one way I know what topics are performing well for me is through analytics. And that's why knowing at least the basics of being able to go in there, see what your top rated posts are, not only currently, but over time. Because as I said, I have some always are on that list. Doesn't matter how long I've had them up. And then I have some that go and come.
Can you give us an example? Give us an example of, say, your top 5.
Okay, well, I would say this, and I just reposted it again. I did an article, which honestly is not one of my longest or most difficult articles, but I did it on Lingu. It's a very famous master tongue point. That article, I have an area on my website or the blog area, and it says popular posts. It is almost always in the popular posts. And that has been at least 4 or 5 years. Okay, since I put it up, that post has been shared, I don't even know how many times. It's been republished. It's been republished in other languages. Huge success. The vulvodynia articles have been popular, but I think that's more niche market. I've also found that things where, for example, I did an article on the yin and yang of the menstrual cycle. So while there's a lot of stuff about gynecology, the whole point of that one was to explain how you could correlate the different phases of the cycle with yin and yang, which was something not that many people had talked about. And I went through each phase and I was like, you know, the follicular phase is considered more of the yin phase, the yang, the ovulation flips to the yang phase. And that was another way of me changing it. some other articles. I did some fertility articles in the beginning that were big successes. Those were articles, though, I worked really, really hard on. I originally published on another site, and I had a lot of research to back up. Let's see, what else? And those have still lived on. There was one I did on depression in the beginning that was a very big hit, a PTSD article. I did also, has been very good for me. And then articles, which is interesting, if I do some articles on Chinese medicine basics and explain them well, that's good. But another one that's been a huge winner is cupping, because I forget which tool this is, but I think I discussed it in the content management seminar, is you can even go look. There's ways to find out topics people are searching for, how much people are searching for them, and then how much competition you have for that topic. And one of the reasons I started writing more in cupping was a high search item with low competition. And again, because I am not some huge potato, I'm a smaller potato, I need to pick topics that are going to be high volume search, low competition. And my cupping articles, especially the ones I published on Mind Body Green, have been incredibly popular. So, and now that cupping picked up, which shows again how it lives on the internet, when cupping picked up again, I got 3 calls, the whole thing of Michael Phelps that week, I got 3 calls to be on the radio that week because people Googled it, and there I was with cupping.
And I guess that's interesting. One of the things which I found incredibly useful about your seminar, which you did, and again, just a reminder to everybody watching that you'll see Jennifer's talk on social media and reaching out using content strategy in our Thriving in Practice program. But that idea that you always talk about coming from a place of do what you love first. That you can't make up article. You can't be chasing patients that you don't necessarily want to see just because it's popular. That it's really it's really about being really authentic. And I guess I've got another part to that question, and it's really looking now. We're halfway through the webinar, and what I'd love to get from you is where are you at now that you've talked about, you set yourself up in this practice where you had this arrangement on a pro rata relationship with the owner or the person who had the clinic. And
the woman who runs the space at least far. And
there were different practitioners all working under that one roof. So tell me now about what's going on for you and what your plans are.
I have very exciting plans. I'm super excited. I'm so excited. I'm just starting to publicly announce this. I am opening a new office. I love my new office. And it just is so fabulous. And this came about somewhat quick. It's one of those things, I thought about it. It came about quickly, but I think this is a very good example of when they say that luck is defined by opportunity meeting preparedness. And I feel that I was presented and very lucky to find this space and to find it at a time. I have a colleague that I'm going to be opening the office with who we get along fantastic. And we really were just like, oh, let's just whatever. We heard about a space, let's look at it. We were like, oh my God. Like we knew we could have looked for months and never found a space like this at this rent ever again. So we decided, let's do it. And it wasn't like long and drawn out at thought, but I also realized I had spent many years preparing because I now have a pretty consistent flow of clientele. This office is not so far away that I think I will lose a lot of people. And it will be all mine. Well, not all mine, of course, I'm with a colleague, but we have a lot of, luckily we agree on a lot. But I'm so excited because now I'm actually making that transfer to having my own place. And it feels like it worked out so well because even though in some ways I feel like maybe I should have left the other space sooner, the way things came together with this just worked out so well. And when we saw it, it was just like, boom, we both had this epiphany and it just turned out to be such a great space. I mean, it's a storefront. It's about 1,000 square feet, waiting room, 3 treatment rooms, kitchen, bathroom. And I will end up, I mean, of course, there's an initial outlay of money which cost more, you know, the attorney, the renter's insurance, the security deposit, all those exciting things. But in the long run, I calculated it all out. I will be paying the same amount of rent plus including the utilities. My monthly expense will be about the same as what I'm paying on a slower month at the current office. So I will get my whole own thing the way I want to do it. And I feel that in this new office, one, that's great to know I can at least make rent, of course, but I think we'll be able to really thrive because we've learned so much. We have really good set ideas about how we want to go forward. And we're both, my colleague is Morgan. She's an excellent massage therapist. And we are both really excited to do it. And now that I'm in this space where I'm actually moving on, I can feel all of these feelings of, wow, I really want to do this. Like, I don't even think I realized how much I wanted to do it until like I saw the space and realized this is a real possibility and you can't let this go. So that's where I am now. And I'm in that transition phase of finishing up in my old space. We're going to be taking over. I already signed the lease with Morgan. We're going to be taking over the office mid-May. And then, you know, luckily, which is another thing that's perfect about the space, is it really doesn't need a build out or anything. We just have some handyman repairs. We want it cleaned. We want to have things. We may not have every single thing set up, but we at least need the basics in place before we start seeing patients. I think I said it was a storefront, which is great. The location is great. It's quieter. It's condominium residences. It even has already a music sound system, dimmers. I mean, hardwood floors, a big window. We have to get off the law firm's decal, but we're so happy about it.
And so my question is, I'm thinking, yeah. I'm listening to you speak, and I'm thinking of, you know, our audience watching today who either are in that stage that you're at, that you've gone from being in one premise and moving to another. But this also applies to anybody that's moved. Like, you know, I've certainly moved, I've moved different countries and had to do that same, you know, finding a space and getting started. And so my question for you is, how many people do you think, say, of your database, what's the percentage of your database who you think will transition to the new space versus what's the percentage that you're going to need to almost start fresh? Like that new catchment, new people, new patients.
I actually, just to let you know, earlier in my career, while I was at this office, I actually worked at a couple other offices too. So I did go through a transition period of consolidating to this office before, but so I know what that's like. The great thing is, at this point, I have some pretty loyal, dedicated customers, or I don't even say clients, patients. And because the office we're going to be renting is literally a 10 to 15 minute walk from my current office, and there's a bus and all of that, it's a little bit more inconvenient by public transportation. But I think I have a good chance at the vast majority following me.
Like 80, what's the percentage, like 80%, 60%, 70%?
I mean, let's put it this way. This is how I always look at it. I would rather underestimate and be happily surprised, but I think I might even get as much as 90%. Okay. I mean, I really feel pretty good. Everyone I've talked to has been very positive. And I am going to make a real concerted effort to, for example, some of the things that I plan to do as well is I have some patients now I've had for years, but they're more kind of like they pop in here and there, as well as current patients. Besides sending out like a newsletter announcement or making an announcement on Facebook, people that I have a relationship with, I'm going to send them personal emails. I'm going to let them know, you know, hey, I'm so excited, because these are people I've stayed in touch with for years, to make them feel more included. And then I will also be doing kind of bigger, wider announcements. And hopefully, of course, being in a newer space, we will garner new patients from being in a newer space and from having a storefront.
That's sort of what I want to get out from you, because, you know, because of your marketing prowess and because of your history, It's really looking.
Right.
Let's look at that 10% that's missing. You know, in order to.
Okay.
And the reason why is that I know that we've got acupuncture professional members who have recently moved countries or moved state.
Okay.
And it's those people. It's that starting again, and it's starting again. For some people, it might be returning after maternity leave. That idea of
right.
you've created something, and then you're going back into the workforce, and there's some fantastic opportunities because you can redefine who you are and the way you practice.
Mm-hmm.
You can reset your pricing system even. You can actually charge more
mm-hmm.
or less or however you want to do it. But it's that 10% of people now, the new clients. What are you going to do to attract new people?
Okay, so we have a few different ideas. One thing is we are planning to have a few different open houses. But one of the open houses, we're definitely going to gear toward the neighborhood. And our plan for that is to really, because one, there's a lot of residents, but there's also, you know, there's a law office, hair salon, restaurant. We want to go around and personally talk to these people and say, hey, you know, Friday evening, the blah, blah, blah. We would love it if you'd stop by. We're going to have wine and hors d'oeuvres. You know, we could talk to you about, we also think we're going to run a raffle for that one, like get a free massage or a free acupuncture treatment if you give us our email for our database, which we then can add to a newsletter to send out to them. So that is one way we're going to be making our presence known. Also, looking at places that want to do a little collaboration. So for example, there is, do you guys have floating in your country? There's a thing here where you float in these tanks.
Oh yeah, the sound deprivations, yeah.
The sensory deprivation tanks, yes. So as it turns out, there's a newer place that's really quite nice that I've actually been to that opened not so long ago. And they're also looking to make connections. So we've already discussed with them maybe doing discount codes for their clients. They could do discount codes for our clients. Also, another option that we may have is bringing in people to do workshops or other types of events, because then they will bring in their clientele or people that they attract because it's to their best interest, but it also exposes those people to us. So I would say, and then of course, one of our biggest priorities is changing the signage on that window as soon as we can, so that when people walk by, they even know we're there. We also thought of some simple things, even Morgan suggested, because so many people walk their dogs in that neighborhood, of putting like a doggy bowl out, you know, as they do in some places, just to show, you know, we're friendly, you know, let your dog have some water out there, stuff like that. And then in terms of like the content marketing, some things that I will be doing is I will now be moving from an area called River North to River West, even though they're not that far. But on social media, I'm just going to start hashtagging River West. I will start using, again, that would be a new keyword for me to add in. So when I say posts, I will say things, for example, you may notice when I've written, I'll say my Chicago office, my River North office in Chicago. I know it makes the sentence longer, but it gets that in. And that way too, if people are doing searches for acupuncturists in River West Chicago, I am more likely to pop up. So that's something else. I'm also, of course, going to be making changes on my website, on my various social media profiles, and be promoting things with the new address on all of that. And one other idea I had, which it's not really my idea, I've seen some other acupuncturists do it and I think it's a great idea, so I'm gonna do it, is I've noticed that people have put up kind of before and after pictures as they've, you know, been decorating their offices. And I thought that it would be fun, like right now our office is, well, almost our office is a law office. So I even thought of like, see this law office? It's going to be an acupuncture and massage office. And, you know, start with those photos, or even put up things like, so what do you guys think of these desks? We're thinking, you know, or we're thinking of these chairs for our waiting room. So that's
that inclusivity on the journey.
Exactly. And then hopefully get people excited to see the finished result. And another great thing is Morgan, my colleague, is an artist. So we're going to use some of her art in the space. And, you know, that's something else we can show off. My mom does art. We'll do some of that. We're going to do a kid-friendly thing where hide all the breakables. And I think we'll do some face painting and, you know, have some games for kids and parents can come in.
A lot of those, those sorts of activities are very much about luring people to the physical location.
Right.
So it's very much about that.
Yes.
The fact that you've changed physical location, and therefore it's important that people walk into that location in order to understand what it is you're offering in the new space.
Not even walk in, but that's the great thing about social media too, is I want them to, I feel that the more you can make connections with people, the better. And I have been able to do that on social media as well. And that's why I'm thinking about things like, you know, even posting like, oh, Morgan and I are in there today, you know, getting our coat hooks up or hanging pictures. And we want the space. One thing we really want for this space is to it be in an inviting space. You know, we're going to do like, we want to have a charging station for people's iPhones. So if they come in, they can just stick their iPhone in and plug it because so many people are running down. We want to, another thing that I'm going to do to generate more income, for example, in this space is in the old space, I wasn't able to have a display cabinet in the waiting room. And everything has always been in the back cabinets. No one's ever seen it. And already 10% of my yearly income is from herbal sales. And I have a business license. And if I decide I'm going to get display cases, and not only am I going to put out some of the herbs, but I might put out some Maizen skincare or only products that I truly believe in and already recommend. But having them in a display case in the waiting room, I am hoping I can also maybe take that percentage from 10 to 20, you know, and start making more money on that as well. So the other thing we're also thinking of doing too, which could attract patients, but also will make us more money, is down the road, subletting some space to other practitioners as well. I would say, and the other thought we had is there's a hair salon straight down the street. We're going to Morgan actually needs a haircut anyway. So I think she's going to be making a visit. And one of my patients told me that him and his buddies always go to this golfing range that's not so far and then come eat at this restaurant, which is right near my new office, which, by the way, another big plus, I have a sushi restaurant a block away. And he was saying how, you know, they do golf and all this. And I thought, and he's like, you know, the guy runs the place himself. And I was like, this should be a guy I should talk to, because how many people who play golf get little injuries or pains? And if he's a smaller business, he would be looking probably to interact with people as well. So those are some of the ideas that we've come up with.
So keep going. I'm going to pick up on one of those. So keep going.
Okay, I was just going to say, though really that's not new patients, but the idea of sending out some personal invitations when we do the kind of already people we know, I think that will be a good idea. But right now, I would say those are the major ideas we have for trying to generate new business. We want to kind of become a bit of a staple in there. You know, like Morgan is very, very sweet, and she just has such a sweetness about her. And she's already said she's been daydreaming. She wants to leave the window shades up, sit at her desk and wave at people as they go by, you know, and just keep more normal office hours, because we really weren't able to do that at the current space we're at in the same way. And you know, be able to talk to people and just kind of get out when we go to the restaurant or get a cup of coffee and say, hey, we just opened a space down there.
So it sounds like to me everything you're saying is about that autonomy and that ownership has given you a much greater emotional buy-in with your business. That by having this space and now it being, you know, completely yours, that you feel passionate to be able to then invite the whole world to come and experience what you have to offer. So I guess one of the things I'm really thinking, it's been lovely hearing you say that, because everybody on this call today can take away some of those gems, you know, in terms of you know, just how to attract more patients. That even as an established practitioner, you're now having to attract more patients. So I've got a question. Yes. We're just sort of in the final stage of the webinar, but a question for you is, what are your strategies for using your current database to get word of mouth referrals from your existing patients? Do you have any particular way of engaging your current or previous clients to have them send their friends or to initiate further activity?
I do.
Referrals. What do you do on that front?
Okay, so you do have to be a little careful about it because I don't know where the laws are in other states, but there are certain laws governing like how you do referrals here. But I would say one, getting reviews online has absolutely been one of the best ways to attract patients. And if I have patients who've been really happy with me or who I really like, I feel really comfortable with, I will sometimes say, hey, I would love it if you would write a review for me on the site. I might even send them a link to the site because the easier you make it, the more likely they are to do it. I've also, years ago, I did a thing where I said, if you wrote, because I would have patients, well, do you ever do discounts? I don't do a lot of discounts, but I would say, you know, if you write me a review, I'll give you $10 off your next treatment. Or I don't advertise this because I don't want, you have to be careful about how money is an incentive. But if people refer friends of theirs to me, after the patient comes in, I'll say, you know, I really appreciate you referring someone to me. I'm gonna give you $10 off today. Or if I've had a patient who's referred several people to me, or I've, you know, seen over years and probably made thousands and thousands of dollars from, I've even sent out cards saying, you know, personal written cards saying, you know what, I really love, I may not put it quite like that, but you know, I so appreciate you as a patient. I really like you, and I really appreciate your referrals. And so please consider this card, you know, a gift certificate for a free acupuncture treatment to use when you wish. So I try to be very grateful. I do find though that sometimes you really do need to ask, but again, you have to be careful who you ask and how you ask. I again don't like to be pushy about it. But there's definitely patients where I have relationships where they'll say, oh yeah, I should write a review. And I'll be like, that would be so great, because absolutely that getting those good reviews makes a big difference. And I keep track, I have a people check where they heard about me. And one of the biggest places they check is an online review site, because, and they say, you just had so many good reviews. Mm-hmm. So,
and that was actually one of the questions came in.
That would be big.
Helen actually asked, and you just picked up on it. Then Helen asked, you know, what do you do so that you don't sound like you're being too pushy? You know, how do you promote yourself and get yourself out there without sort of looking like you're, you know, it's a very fine balance where you become your own product. It's much easier to sell a clinic space and something separate than your services as a personal thing.
Well, this is what I would say. Is, I mean, all patients are different, but I definitely have some patients that I am friendly with, that I will, you know, even if they're not coming in, like I had a patient who was dealing with postpartum, her child was premature, and I really adored her anyway. I mean, I thought she was the biggest sweetheart, but you know, for example, she's someone I stayed in touch with, you know, just every week or so I'd send her a text, how's it going? How's your baby? And she's someone who has expressed how much she loves me, you know, and I've been so helpful, and she's referred me people, and she also happens to work in online. And I just said, you know, it would be great, you know, if you get a chance, if you could write me a review, that would be so great for me. But she's someone I really felt I could say that to, because one, we were already established. I feel you always have to wait and establish a relationship. You cannot ask for that in the beginning. Now, in the beginning, I've had people say, wow, this was a great experience, I want to write about it. And I go, great, thank you so much. But I will not ask just anyone, and I will make sure that I've absolutely done the best I can for them and given them above and beyond, and that they're somebody who would be happy to do something nice for me, you know? So that's how I play it. And I really, so one, it's choosing the correct people. And two, I think it's presenting it more in a way of, you know, I'm trying to get more reviews, or you don't even need to say that. Just, you know, it would be so great if you could write me a review. It really helps my business. Mm-hmm. You know,
so just that authentic look at, you know, I don't want to, exactly. Not over the top, just this is my business works by word of mouth referrals. I really appreciate, you know, you being able to support my business.
Right, and I won't push it, and I will say, you know, if you have a chance, and a lot will do it, some forget to do it, some may do it months down the line, and then if I've asked, I'm not going to keep asking either. You know, you don't want to hound somebody. So, but I will say this, if they've said to me, yes, or of course I'd love to. One thing too, the easier you make it for them, the better. So I will often, if they say, yeah, I'd love to do that for you, I will often follow up and send them the direct links to where they can write the review in an email, so that all they have to do is click the link and write the review, rather than they even have to do a search or make any extra efforts. Because the easier you make it, the more likely it is they'll do it. So that's how I approach it. But again, I really just try to come from, and you know what, if it's a patient that I don't feel that rapport with, I probably won't ask. So that's how I do it.
Well, Jen, this has been the most fascinating. An hour always goes so quickly, and of course, I could sit with you for hours and just pick your brains and hear the enthusiasm that you have for obviously not just setting up your practice, but for sharing that with other acupuncturists.
I do.
You know,
I really do.
It's really generous of you to give away all your tips and tricks today, and also with the webinar that we did looking at social media, reaching out and how to get your message out there. So, you know, we really do appreciate that. I've just got one interesting question come in, and it's with regards to what you said at the very beginning of the webinar about people setting up, you know, and that idea where when you start out as an acupuncture new graduate, that you want to keep your overheads as low as you possibly can. And the questions come in from Anna, who's just talked about then, you know, people often are inclined to work in either hair salons or in natural product shops. You know, you mentioned Whole Foods, for example.
Okay.
And do you think that affects the credibility of what you're offering as an acupuncturist if you...
I think you have to watch out. I do think you have to watch out. I mean, for me, I did some consultations for like 3 hours, one Sunday a month, in conjunction with, I have an office down the block. So that was different. And I definitely made a point of looking for a space that I would feel good about people coming to. Now, it also depends on the clientele you want to attract. For example, if you want to have a more spa-like practice, if you want to focus more on cosmetic acupuncture, going to a spa or perhaps even a hair salon might be a good choice for you. Now, I would say if you go to any place, okay, you better make sure you have a quiet room and that they have an easy way to get through the, like if it's at a hair, like I don't think a hair salon's really the best idea, honestly, but I feel like, you know, a spa you could probably do if that's your genre. I am at a wellness center, which was really, to me, the perfect solution. But I also have worked in chiropractic offices. As I said, I had a friend who got in with a hospital, which was great. But I do think, you know, it'd be one thing, let's say it's a natural food store and above the natural food store, there's offices. That to me is different than if, oh, you go into the store and you go back through a little hallway and then there's this small room. That's the thing too. So I do think it can affect your credibility, and you have to choose wisely because first impressions matter a lot. And it really does. I'm telling you, and you will get paid more. Like I am in probably a higher end area too. So if I had a crappy office, people are not going to go for it. And it just doesn't look good.
I love what you said, and it was a passing comment, but you said you want to work in a space that makes you feel proud, that you love to work in. And I think that in itself, I think makes you a better practitioner. I think it does. I think that if you're in a space where you feel you are happy, that you exude that happiness and that your patients pick up on that, and that the whole premise becomes a healthy place.
And the office has you want an office with a good vibe. And the other thing I find is really important is one place to not spare expense is a patient's comfort. Okay. And there's very small things you can do to make people comfortable, but they appreciate it. I will tell you, especially being in Chicago, I always have bed warmers on my table. I have extra bed padding. I have TDP lamps. I have blankets. I have heaters in every room. Okay. I am very aware. I make sure people have towels. They have gowns. They have what, you know, I want them to be as comfortable as possible. And I will actually always say, are you comfortable? Is there anything else I can do to make you more comfortable? I have lots of props. That's something I've always been willing to spend money on because, for example, here's a quick example. I know someone who opened an incredibly expensive clinic and she used paper sheets. Yes. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I hate laying on paper sheets. Why not pay for laundry service? Like,
You're
To
charging
me,
for
it
it,
was
that's
such a
right.
turnoff,
That's
you
right.
know, and people notice that, and they notice that you care, you know, and I also just try to be very respectful of people. Like I always say, let's say they have to change. I will say, okay, well, I'm leaving you a towel and a gown. I will knock before I come in. So they know I'm not going to be just barging in on that, you know? So I think also, besides feeling like it's a good space, it's a clean space, it's a space you feel good about, make sure they are comfortable. Huge.
Excellent. Listen, we're gonna wrap up on that note, and I just, Jennifer, if
Okay.
you can please share with our audience today. We've had some wonderful feedback. One being you are gorgeous, and I can absolutely see why people are going to travel from one side of Chicago to the other, if needs be, to follow you to your new practice. But just in summary,
Luckily, it's not
how
that
can we find you? How can we, as an audience at Acupuncture Professional, how do we find you
far.
and
Okay.
follow your journey?
Okay. Well, first of all, please find me. And if you have any questions going forward, I really am very open. So you can email me, you can tweet me, you can Facebook me. The ways you can find me are, my website is TCM007.com. My handle on Twitter, this gets really easy, is at TCM007. I am also present on Facebook. I have both a personal account, feel free to friend me. I also have 2 different business pages, one for my book called Adventures in Chinese Medicine, and then one for my practice, which is Jennifer Dubowsky, Acupuncturist, Chicago. And my email is tcm007@rcn.com, but you can also find that on my website. So please stay in touch. I love to hear from people all over the world. I think it's so cool. And I've learned a lot from other people, which is another huge benefit to me.
Indeed.
So,
well, thank you so much. On
I hope that
behalf
helps.
of everyone watching today, as well as those who watch the video replay, thank you for just being fabulous, and for being you, and for sharing all this wonderful information. And
well, thank you so much. I hope it was useful.
Yeah, everybody watching will have something they can walk away from, and it's sort of like having a refreshing, refreshing boost to our acupuncture practice. So thank you again, Jennifer Dubowsky,
Good.
and thank you everyone for coming along today.
Thank you.